We are now recording. Welcome everybody. I'd like to welcome you to today's Info2Go. This webinar is brought to you by the Idaho Commission for Libraries with some funding support through our friends at the Institute of Museum and Library Services. This session is being recorded today, and the recording will be hosted and available on our website, probably starting as early as tomorrow. So if you have any friends that you want to share this with, colleagues, supervisors, please direct them to our website. My name is Tammy Hollyhouse, and I am your host today. But I would like to welcome our two presenters. Today we have two guests from the McCall Public Library. We have Meg Logic and Casey Brook. Not sure if I pronounced Casey's last name correctly, but thank you for joining us, and I will turn things over to them.
Thanks, Tammy. Yeah, we were just, thanks for the introduction. Our first slide is just kind of a title screen, but I think we're ready to dig a little deeper. So the next one is going to go, just a minute. Click it. Okay, so here's a quick little definition of what Doing Democracy, our program, is, and then we'll talk more about where it came from. But it's the free discussion series at our library, open to everyone, with the purpose of examining local issues and how they relate to the bigger picture.
And the other purpose is that we really hope to foster a culture of civil discourse to allow multiple perspectives and creative conflict. The idea of this is that it could lead to the discovery of common needs and perhaps common visions. And since Casey is our programming librarian here at the library, and I'm the library director, we came together and put this program together with some volunteers. So we'll take you through a tour of how we got started, and we'll allow you all a chance to weigh in with your communities and some ideas you have. And then we'll wrap it up with some questions and answers at the end.
Okay. Next slide.
So I'd like to start actually by picking your brain. So for those of you who are attending, I hope the chat box is working for you because we'd like to use that to take a quick webinar poll. So the question is, what are some words or phrases that you associate with democracy? And you can go ahead and start typing. There's no one correct answer, and we're only going to allow about 60 seconds for an answer, so we just want whatever on the top of your head, whatever comes to mind when you hear the phrase democracy. What do you think of? Good, so freedom, choice. I see input and representation, group participation.
Voting.
Yes. Ooh.
Theory versus application.
Good. Just a couple more seconds. If anyone is figuring out how to enter into the chat box, just whatever comes to mind when you think of democracy. Good. So it's really interesting to think about. It's something that sometimes we almost take for granted. But we started thinking about what role does the public library fill in our country where we have a democracy. Yeah, so what role does the public library play in that? And in our community here in McCall, we thought, or we found that a way that the library can be involved in the process of democracy was something we wanted to explore. So we thought about how the library has long been an important player in the role of democracy because it can educate our voting population to be more informed. But we thought that maybe a new way we could be involved is interacting with each other as sort of living resources, not resources on the web or in books or magazines or newspapers. So the living resources in each of our communities are the people themselves. And those are the people who have the freedom to make the choices, to select their representation by voting. So participating as a group, we thought, how can we bring these folks together face to face and discuss these issues? And when you think about it, it's much the way that democracy started, right? Which was face to face and debating the issues in public forums. And we figured that bringing folks together to discuss, it's a little bit harder to hate or misunderstand when you're face to face. So we started small and we started nurturing the democracy in this local level, and thought we could increase the role of the library in our democracy. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. There were two really important volunteers as we created this program. So we wanted to not just give them a shout out, but tell you why they were important to this at our library. Judy is on the left and Melissa, they're both, well, Judy's a retired teacher and Melissa is a current teacher at the high school. They're both library users, and they were among several people who approached us at the beginning of this adventure. So it started in 2016, and it was after the divisive election cycle that year, when several members of the communities approached us separately and asked if we could somehow use the library as a place to encourage more civility and to let the community wrestle with controversial topics, but in a neutral environment or in a safe environment. So after we got 3 or 4 of these kinds of requests, Casey and I sat down and considered the possibilities and thought, you know, it kind of hit a spark with us. And we thought, what could this do for our community?
Yeah, so we sat down with all these volunteers, Judy and Melissa, and there were some others too, but we had several meetings before we even thought about having a program about this, just to see what it would look like. And Judy was the one who helped us craft our goals and purposes, and it was decided that we would use Francis Moore Lappé's model of doing democracy, in which we facilitate public discussion by creating an atmosphere where people can model, learn appropriate ways to interact, even when opinions are different. All this backbone stuff gave us a place to start, because it took a lot of planning and several months of in-depth conversations and several meetings before we were able to clarify our goals and framework. Only then did we feel confident to take it to the community.
So again, just crucial that we had these volunteers, because this was truly a grassroots program that evolved from the community, and we're shooting for some pretty lofty ideals, and these two women really helped us shoot for those ideals.
Okay. So here are the clear goals we were able to craft through those meetings with Judy and Melissa. The first one is to support and expand the library's role by promoting dialogue about issues that face our community. The library's role would be enlivening our democracy by creating a culture of civil discourse that allows for multiple perspectives, creative conflict, and the discovery of common grounds.
So second goal, to train a group of people in facilitating public discussion by creating an atmosphere where the experience of public discussion is possible and where people may feel uncomfortable, but always safe. To educate ourselves and the public on the skills of democracy.
Okay, and lastly is to nurture a more connected community through honoring relationships, fostering engagement, and by doing the work of recognizing community needs and co-creating a vision of a vital, healthy, and caring community. So with those goals in mind, we had our first public program, and we used the design jam method to generate topics. And let me talk about the Design Jam a little bit. The Design Jam is a way to let the community be in the driver's seat as much as possible. At our first meeting, members of the public came together to brainstorm a list of topics they would like to discuss over the next year. And we greased the wheel by putting up a few of these topics ahead of time. But we'd start with putting the topic ideas up on a wall. Everybody would write them down. And then we would have a couple other members of the community group these topics together so we could have just a few more narrowed down that way. And then everyone would vote on the topics they felt was the most important to them. And then once we got about 5 or 6 topics, we would schedule 1 topic per month and generate open-ended questions to kind of get these programs started.
So let's give you a couple of examples. I think our next slide.
Next one's examples.
So these were some of the ones that we've done over the past year or two, just a sampling. And you can see that some of them were very local issues to us. For example, the Midas Gold Stibnite mining project is one that's happening right here in our county. And then something like discussing white privilege takes it all the way out to a national or, of course, international level. So it's a pretty unique forum in that whatever people want to talk about, they can throw their ideas of topics into our Design Jam, and whether it's local, county, state, or national, it's good for discussion in our group.
Okay, the next one. So yeah, this is kind of the beginning of our programs each month. Get the ideas flowing and to grease the wheels, so to speak, so that the discussion is primed and ready. I always have some hot tea out and some snacks for people when they come in. Then we also have these strips of blank paper, and I ask them with the topic in mind, like what questions or why did you come in, and what questions did you have, or do you want to talk about tonight? And then we'd put them up on the wall, so as everybody else would come in, they would see these questions and kind of start thinking about this topic at hand.
And then they can add their own questions too. And so you can see the example, the ones that were hanging in the wall, that was the day that we talked about gun control was a topic. So any question goes, like there's one about common sense gun control. Does that threaten the Second Amendment? Who profits from people being afraid? Some of them are a little bit more local, like what does it require to own a gun? Or no, actually that one was, do you have to own a gun to be elected in Idaho? So some provocative questions, some factual questions, some are, just any variety of, any question can go, and they're all very open-ended. So once those are up on the wall, we also wanted to remind or tell you that we generally set the chairs up in a circle so that it's a fluid environment. There's no table, there's no paperwork. It's very much a discussion-based meeting. So.
Okay. Next one. So when the session starts, the time to start comes. Our first step is having a go-round introduction, where everybody, you just go all the way around the whole group, and everybody just tells us their names and like one quick sentence about why they came tonight. And I have the time's up in the corners because this whole program is pretty timely based. You can really run over time on this. So I've been putting, like, on the next slides, you'll see other timing circles. This one I set for 15 minutes for the go around. And then we would talk about rules. Rules are a good way to help everyone that's participating feel safe when they come. And after a while, we started establishing these ground rules. At first, every single session, we would have the whole group create the rules each time. but it started looking the same every time. So this is kind of our ground rules, and then we'd ask if anybody wants to add more after that, but kind of came down to these 4 were the most important.
And Melissa, who's the volunteer who's there on the left, she was great at this because she, being a teacher of high school, she would set up the whiteboard and put these rules out, and then she would very clearly set those expectations or those established ground rules for the group. And she's, you know, quite comfortable in that role, but anyone could do it.
Okay.
So we'll go to our next slide.
Okay, so after the rules, the go-around is done, we would break everybody up into smaller groups. Usually just count off numbers, 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, depending on how big the group is. Try to keep it evenly, so each group is as even as possible. In the crowd, there would often be experts and interest groups and those sorts of things. We would try to divide them up as evenly as possible too, so we didn't have all the experts or interest groups all in one group. Kind of spread them out more. After the groups are made, they go claim a few of the questions hanging up on the walls, maybe their questions or questions that spoke to them, and bring them back to their group. And as you can see in the pictures, we would also give them a big, huge piece of paper that they could kind of take notes of what their discussion is happening in the small group. Try to assign a secretary with the pen to write down little topics and ideas that came up. So when we got back into the large group, they had something to talk about and to look back upon when they're asked.
Okay. So just these photos are nice, so you can kind of see how people are just spread out throughout our little library. They just find a spot where they're comfortable. Some sat on the tables or at the tables, and then others, this group is sprawled out in the children's section on the floor. So they can go wherever they want and settled in and start discussing and taking notes about their conversation. By the way, please let us know. Go ahead and use that chat box if you have questions as we proceed. We will have time at the end for questions also, but feel free and we'll see what we can address as we go in case we missed anything. So this photo, again, it's just another one of the small groups discussing. And you can see kind of from this photo, we have quite a variety of people who attend. In this particular picture, we have a teenager, a woman from a corporate organization, they're kind of representing her corporate interest, and then some general citizens just there because they're concerned or have questions. We've also had in attendance county commissioners, our city manager, our mayor, city council members, and all of that is a really good venue for the elected officials to talk with people in a meeting that's not agenda driven. It's not it's not agenda driven where they're going to have to vote on an action item or something like that. It's just more of an informal conversation, and a lot of good factual information gets transferred. So for example, when we were talking about recycling, which is a county issue in our community, that one of the county commissioners came, and a lot of the complaints and concerns that the citizens had were able to be explained or addressed by that county commissioner because he's been in his office for several years. He knows the issue inside and out. He knows the challenges from a completely different perspective than the average citizen would know. So it was really helpful. It helped people answer questions. However, I just want to emphasize that when these folks are attending, whether they're corporate or a county commissioner or a mayor or whoever, they're attending as equals. So they don't get the floor. They don't get to filibuster. They just get to participate as an equal, and they are expected to listen and respect others just as others can listen and respect them.
Okay. Yeah, this is kind of getting towards the end of the program, the last 30 minutes or so. The small groups come back into the large group, and The secretaries that we appointed in the small groups are first to report on the big group conversations, and we don't really open it up to the whole group while the secretaries are reporting, just trying to go around and get at what all the little groups are talking about first. After that, the whole group can then discuss. This is a challenging, probably the most challenging part of the whole program, because the facilitators were trying to step up to make sure everything flows and all the voices are heard and that no one dominates. But that's definitely a challenge, because there will be people that want to take up all the time. Sometimes I'll use a stopwatch or some sort of timekeeping device that'll make a noise that'll beep them out, something like that, depending on how the time is going. It also depends on the size of your group too. So they try to tell everyone to keep everything short. Okay, and then the last step is our final go around. So we finish with one last little go around, and all we ask people is to tell us something that they learned tonight or what made the biggest impression on you tonight. This is a great time to get everyone's word again, because once it opens up to the big group, not everyone participates in that format. Also, as a library staff, this is a great time to get feedback about this particular program and topic, because they will be pretty honest with you at this point after listening and participating this far into it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've been talking and tried to kind of take you through that process of how we get together, how we generate discussion topics, how we break into small groups, and then how we finish the program. So let's take a short break here from us talking and listen to your ideas again. So thinking about your own community, go ahead and use that chat box again and tell us what are some topics for discussion that you could do in your community.
Nice.
Nice, yeah. Thanks, Megan. Megan's on, she's got several ideas already. Any other ideas out there that anyone would like to toss out to the group?
For those of you that are unable to see the chat box, some of the things that are popping up are public health, responsible growth, cost of living, white privilege, religious freedom, importance of civic engagement. These are great. Keep going. What are some other?
Vaccinations.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, someone wrote in new Americans or refugees. Great idea. Vaccinations. Yes. So anything that's in the news, people are talking about in your community, again, whether it's very local or very national or international. Mickey writes that she's at a women's, he or she, I'm not sure, at a women's college. I imagine we'll be talking a lot about Georgia's heartbeat bill. Good, yeah.
And when those kind of timely topics pop up, we have a few times sort of hijacked it and put those in, because they're a hot item topic of the month. And it brings a lot more people in that way too, if you can be flexible.
Yeah, that's a good point, Casey, because sometimes something that's coming up on a city council agenda or the county commissioner's agenda sparks that interest, and people really want to gather information and discuss before the official public hearing. So a question came in that says, do you focus on just one topic per meeting? And the answer is yes, we do choose just one. We find that, like Casey mentioned earlier, the programs can get a little bit long. So it would be hard to do this kind of format with more than one topic.
Mm-hmm.
There might be a way, but our way wouldn't work so well with that. So again, feel free to keep using the chat box if you like, but we'll continue on. Thanks for your great ideas.
Yeah, so we're moving on to just general kind of promotion and how we were able to market this program. You can see to the left the first flyer we made to like one of the more modern flyers that we have. The evolution of the flyers, I guess you could say. So yeah, the flyers were one way. I also had this kind of visual flyer online and got that out through Facebook and website. And we have a local newspaper where we would put this. We put an article in it every month on doing democracy. We also, when we're planning this, we usually target specific people on the topic. And one of the best ways of marketing in our community is word of mouth. And it's one of the more challenging ways to get the word out. So between us and our volunteers, we would get a list of people that we felt were experts or knew about this specific topic that should definitely be invited and try to get them in. It just helps with the whole discussion. So we would target specific people maybe we knew, or we knew someone that knew them, and we'd all have our list of people to reach out to each month.
This is where having those volunteers involved was really important to us, because Judy and Melissa ended up being our core volunteers. We had a larger group, and it kind of filtered down to just Judy and Melissa, but they are not afraid. First of all, they know a lot of people in the community, folks who sometimes Casey and I don't know. And then second of all, they're not afraid to just give them a call or chat with them when they're in line in the post office. We're a pretty small town, but they'll call a business owner or the city planner or whoever they think might have some information, someone from the hospital or someone from the school district, and they're pretty persuasive, and they'll just get those folks to show up, and that's made a huge difference. Just that personal invitation, please attend, we need you to be there.
Oh, I forgot to say, I also have an email list of participants. So whenever anybody would come in at the end of the program, I'd try to get their email to be notified of the next program, and just keep emailing them every month.
We also decided, like, if you look at the two different flyers, we decided to make the topic a lot more bold, or make it sort of pop. And we also decided deliberately to make it more provocative. So you can see in the old flyer, there's kind of that long wordiness, and it talks about how can we design our community so a person's income is not a barrier. So it's kind of long and it's kind of buried in there. So we decided to really draw out each month one provocative question. So this one on the right, it was, should we ban motorized watercraft on Payette Lake? So for those of you who don't know our community, that is a really kind of a hot button issue. And we didn't say, like, let's discuss motorized watercraft. Like, we deliberately used the word ban to try to get people invigorated just by the flyer. So if they read that, they might think, whatever, if they're pro or con, we don't care, whatever their opinion is. If they hate the idea or love the idea, maybe they would come if we're talking about something that's such a hot button issue. So we deliberately tried to be provocative on those.
Mm-hmm. It does seem to work, but use it sparingly. I think we got a little out of control this year on provocative topics, and I don't think it works as well for us now as it did. We had our first provocative topic was, what are we going to do with all these old people? And boy, did they come in, and they were fired up. But then after we explained more and we actually went through the process and the program, everybody was really happy, and we were all friends at the end. But it really brought them in. It worked really well that time.
Right. And again, I think if we had advertised that one as saying, what are the resources that we could tap into to support the senior citizens in our community, it doesn't quite have that same urgency as what are we going to do with all these old people. Fortunately on that one, Judy, our volunteer, said, well, I am an old person, so I can craft the question this way. So we can move on to our wrapping it up. We listed a few of our successes and challenges. Hopefully you guys can take these with a grain of salt, but the positive ones are really exciting. First of all, everyone has kept it civil in spite of the sensitive topics. There's been tension in the room and some discomfort, but really everyone has been civil. So that's amazing to me. Second one says holding sway with elected officials. It's really a chance to get their attention or to sort of get in their ear. Again, whatever you think about whatever topic. The third one, excuse me, the city, we are a city library, and this was really interesting. There was one controversial topic over this past year that they really needed to get public input before the city council could make their decision and before they held their public hearing. So they came to us, and all of a sudden they were saying, could you please, we've heard about your program, we know people discuss topics there, could you please do this topic at your next Doing Democracy? So that was pretty cool. And then there's that ripple effect where folks really start talking here and at our Doing Democracy, and then maybe take those conversations, like often they're lingering right at the library door, out in the parking lot, and then it just kind of ripples into their lives. And again, you have that face-to-face contact with people who maybe you've only seen in a public meeting, maybe you've never even seen them before, you've just seen their name in the newspaper, etc. And honestly, that's where some of the action gets done. And then the last one on the positive side says everyone gets equal time to speak. And I think I mentioned that before when I mentioned that someone like a county commissioner has the same equal time as the 5th grader who's in the room. So that's pretty cool.
A couple of the challenges or not so successful things of this program. We do have people that want to take action. There's a great idea that comes up in the evening, and so what are we going to do with this? Well, there are a lot of committees, a lot of groups in McCall that do take action, but this is not really an action group. We discuss how it could come into action and how we could make it work, and then it can ripple out from there, but we don't get bogged down too much in doing logistics and planning action, actually doing some of these things. And then just getting folks on both sides of the issue to come. That's always been a problem with this program. Using the provocative stuff will help sometimes, and the personal invites also help. But there's been a few programs where like everybody is on the same side of the issue, so it makes it harder to have a full range of ideas and discussion without both sides there.
Mm-hmm. And that was a lesson that we sort of learned as we went. So it's not unusual when we're having our planning session with our volunteers, it's not unusual for us to say, like, who do we know that's really for this? Or who do we know that's against this? Who do we know that's conservative? Who do we know that's liberal? Like, we really are trying to make that personal invite to get people here, but sometimes that's a challenge.
Yeah. And we have another one on here that we didn't put down, and I kind of talked about it when we were talking about earlier things, but it's just the whole aspect of timing, because this can go along with people, especially at the big group, can kind of take up more time than is needed. So just getting everybody into small groups and back into the big group and all that kind of stuff. This is let's see here. This is a 2-hour-long program, but it can easily go a lot longer than that. But
yeah,
2 hours
stay on top of it
is a good amount of time for this.
And I'd like to just say that the format that we use with breaking into small groups, of course, you could do a very similar program without doing that. We find that the small groups allows those who are shy in front of the big group to really be able to participate. But it does take a lot more time, as Casey's saying. It adds to the overall length of the program.
Okay.
So to start to wrap it up, we have listed here some of the resources that we use. And I think there are many more that you probably know about. So again, if you would like to enter anything that you know about, or maybe you've used already at your library, go ahead and enter that into the chat screen. The first one is Doing Democracy, 10 Practical Arts. This is the Frances Moore Lappé. She's the same author that wrote The Diet for a Small Planet, so a lot of you have probably heard of that. But all of her stuff is available, well, all of this document is available at the website that we placed there. So you can see all 10 of the practical arts that helped give us some framework. And then Asking Big Questions. This was an article that was in the Library Journal right about the time, you can see about 2016, right about the time people kept asking us if they could have a discussion forum at the library. I saw that article, and their program is similar and different from ours, but that's a good resource to check into. And then finally, Lappé wrote a newer book called Daring Democracy. And so we put that one on there for you as well.
Okay, moving forward, we will be presenting Doing Democracy at the ILA Conference coming up in October. I have a feeling we're going to make it more hands-on with actually kind of do a mock Doing Democracy there, so you'll get to participate more. If you have any questions, of course, you can call me at the McCall Library at 208-634-5522. And everyone's also invited to one of our sessions here. Check our calendar online, or you can call me and ask to get you an idea of when we meet. It's usually the last Tuesday of every month. And then our library's email address is there too.
So, thank you so much for attending. There are a couple of questions coming up in the chat screen, so we will address those. But maybe some of you have other questions. So go ahead and type those in as we talk, and we'll do our best to get to it. Looks like we have a little bit more time. First, I noticed Tammy asked, were we intentional about using the word we rather than should watercraft be banned? So the only way I can't remember specifically, to be honest, but I'm going to say yes, because everything we've done with Judy and Melissa and Casey and I has been extremely intentional. So all of those goals and purposes and descriptions of the program, like we did drafts and drafts of those, and we really wordsmithed them and tinkered with them to try to get the wording perfect and trying to get it inclusive. So when you asked about using the word we on should we ban watercraft, perhaps it was with that intention of being more inclusive with the community. Like, this is a community decision. What are we going to do about it?
Okay, and Megan's suggesting the Harwood Institute framework, and I look forward to looking at that link there. So thanks, Megan.
Yeah, good idea. And then the next question says, have you found that requiring or utilizing civil discourse could potentially turn into a tool of tone policing, or policing, sorry, tone policing, and not actually assist marginalized groups because it allows for the comfort of those in power privilege positions? Wow, great question. Thank you. So I hadn't thought of it that way. So it's a really good question. And I'm definitely going to bring that to our planning group with Judy and Melissa. And I'm wondering if sometimes that's why we don't have a diverse group of attendees. Perhaps just using that, like, again, everything we've done has been really intentional, but maybe with that intentionality came some drawbacks. So I think we'll have to reevaluate that.
Yeah, because our whole intention is to have it feel comfortable and open for everybody to participate. So it's a good point there.
Yeah, really good point.
Tammy said, it looked like you had some intergenerational participation. Is this typical? I'd say about 50% of the time or so, we have intergenerational participation. Again, it varies by topic for sure. And just our regular library crowd is usually of the older generation. But we do have a 10-year-old boy who's hooked on doing democracy, and he comes to them all. So I guess technically we do have that participation every time with Henry there to balance everyone out. And then we have high school kids come in too, depending on the topic, of course, but they enjoy this kind of format.
Yeah, and I will say that when they do come, it only adds to the richness. It is amazing. Some of the high school students and Henry, the elementary school student, they are amazingly articulate. And I think it's a special opportunity for them to sit in a room with equals and be heard. It's been really, I think, really powerful for them to be listened to, like truly listened to. And when they have that opportunity, I've been so impressed at how articulate they are. We did have one younger teenager attend, and she was pretty quiet. When she had to speak, she did. But I know she was listening to everything and taking it all in as well. So I really appreciate it. And that's one thing I appreciate about public libraries in general, is that we do have all ages here brushing shoulders with each other. And so this is a great opportunity to nurture that kind of community fabric. So Clay is wondering if the library would become politicized. Do you think it would have changed the tone of the program or staff running it instead of volunteers? We try to keep I guess I'm the staff that's running it most of the nights, but it's not really being ran by anyone in particular. If you look at our rules, we have as like rule number 3 that everyone participating is responsible for the outcome of this program. So we really take that to heart and let everybody know that it's not being led by any one person. I kind of keep the timing in mind and I move people around, but I don't really get up on the soapbox and talk about politics too much. And we try to get, like we said before, both sides of the argument in there, ideally, to really bring in that richness. Yeah, that is a really insightful question, though. And although I wouldn't use the word worried, we were definitely aware of the possibility. And one of the things we always are careful to put in the newspaper, maybe on the flyers, is that the topics are not chosen by library staff, but by the participants themselves. So that's an important thing to just, like you say, in the question, it's not just staff saying this is what's important in our community and this is what we need to talk about. It's not driven by us at all, right? That's been a really important ideal, again, that it's more grassroots. It's what do you all want to talk about? Yes, we're here to unlock the doors and put on the hot tea and turn out the lights at the end and maybe keep the time. But again, like Casey said, it's everyone who shows up who's in charge, and it's the topics that the community chose, not the topics that the librarians chose.
Yeah, it's very interactive. So we do expect everyone that shows up is going to be involved and speaking. It's not a passive or spectator sport.
It's not a lecture.
Not a lecture.
Yeah.
Any more questions out there? I'll just give them a couple more minutes and see.
Well, thank you so much. I would invite you again to be in touch, because our contact info is in this presentation, and you may have more specific questions that would be easier to ask over the phone. which we'd be happy to talk about. I also would love to hear if any of you have already done a program like this, tell us about it, or if you do one after this, please tell us about it.
Looks like Mickey had a comment about something that was happening in their libraries. So
Nice.
I'm hopeful that some of you might consider, you know, a forum like this as a way to get participation amongst your community to discuss some interesting and sometimes difficult topics. I'm so thankful to both Meg and Casey for sharing this with us today. We've been hearing a lot about it throughout the state, and I'm happy that they are starting to kind of share how it might work. So thanks again, you guys, and thanks to all of you for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tammy.